Well, for more, we are delighted to be joined in the studio by Makram Rabah, Assistant Professor in the Department of History at the American University of Beirut. Makram, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Right, diving straight in, would you say this is the most consequential election of your lifetime? And are you really surprised by just how tight this is?
Well, the fact that this election is transpiring against the backdrop of three wars basically in the region, be it the Ukraine war, Sudan, or Lebanon and Gaza, it's very important to see who will lead the White House, because ultimately many people in the region bet on a kind of an American initiative. The Americans did not lead from the front. They thought in the last 4 years they can lead from the back. And this is basically what got us into all of this chaos at the moment. So definitely I would call it a very important election. Any election in my book, even small municipal elections somewhere in the world, is important, because ultimately our only bet for change is proper reform through democratic institutions. And this is a culture which unfortunately does not exist back home, for example, in Lebanon.
Were you able to vote in this election? Who would you be tempted to vote for?
Well, I'm not a US taxpayer, but if I was, I would definitely vote for Harris because of other social issues as well. But as a Lebanese, for some reason, we would vote for the Republicans, and particularly Trump. Although Trump does not live up to our expectations and my personal expectations on the ethical level, his administration or the Republicans did not sell out Lebanon and the region to Iran. And particularly our experience with the Obama team, be it Biden or even the people who will be around Kamala Harris, are not people that you can write home about, because ultimately they do believe that engaging Iran beyond the nuclear and allowing them to actually continue doing what they're doing is actually something beneficial for the US. And this is where we differ on the matter.
So would it be fair to say that outside of the US, this region in the Middle East is the most impacted right now? Totally.
To be fair, Lebanese Americans or Arab Americans back home don't really vote on foreign policy. This is why it was very surprising when Trump showed up in Dearborn, in Michigan, one of the main hubs of the Lebanese and the Arabs there. The people were actually supporting him, because at the end of the day, most of these Arab Americans have these small businesses and have these tax brackets which are to the Republican side. So ultimately one has to understand that the Arab Americans in the US won't help us. What the Americans do or will not do hinges on the fact that many of our local politicians and local institutions are not functioning. So ultimately, even if they do something constructive, we still have to have a local initiative which will meet the Americans or any other nation halfway.
So what you're saying is those 250,000 Americans of Lebanese heritage, or possibly more, we don't know, would most likely be inclined to vote for Trump?
In the tax philosophy, yes. Unfortunately, some of these Arab Americans will waste their vote by voting for Jill Stein. And this is actually a kind of a wasted opportunity, because ultimately, just like, for example, the Jewish vote is some way leaning towards the Democrats, if the Arabs play their cards right and if they understand the lobbying game, they can eventually, and if they have a common agenda and a plan, maybe down the road they can influence policy in DC.
Do you think that Trump can be the peacemaker that he really claims to be? And do you think he can end this over a few phone calls?
I don't think so. His personal relationship with Netanyahu will not end this fiasco. It can help in actually forcing the Iranians to remember that under Trump killed Soleimani. And basically using the stick sometimes does work, but ultimately I think the stick has been used and overused in the last year or so. So we need to think outside the box. And ultimately the problem with Trump himself, that he looks at the Arab-Israeli conflict as a real estate dispute. He doesn't look at the humanitarian factor, nor does he understand that extremism breeds extremism. So having someone like Netanyahu continuously disregarding the rights of the Palestinians and the Arabs in general will ultimately allow for the Iranian regime or like Hezbollah or Hamas to become normalized.
So you're saying he's sort of simplified things
totally.
By saying, pick up the telephone, call Benjamin Netanyahu, make a couple of other phone calls and everything will be okay.
It's all about him. He thinks that the world rotates around him, and this is not how policy works. It doesn't work like Obama thought, by basically giving up on the Arab world or ultimately investing in political Islam like he did in the last 10 years. But in one way or another, having Trump in his second term might be different. This is how we are looking at it, especially that many of the Republicans now, especially those in the think tank community and the policy world, know how to deal with him.
So what about Harris then? Do you think she's likely to change course?
Well, we've been following Harris. Harris is now betting on getting Liz Cheney's votes, which are these Republicans who will not vote for Trump. If this happens, ultimately, and this is a discussion I've been having with a friend, we won't have a new Obama in the White House. We'll have someone like Clinton, more of a moderate Democrat that understands world politics, and people like Liz Cheney and her cohort will be running the affairs rather than people like Rob Malley and these pro-Iranian elements who consider the interest of Iran is more important than that of the Americans. When I talk to American policymakers, I tell them, don't do anything that would benefit the Lebanese, do something that would benefit the Americans, and consequently, we will benefit from what you do. Ultimately, we've tried the Obama doctrine, and it failed. So now I think we should look for a new doctrine, be it under Harris or under Trump.
Just lastly, Professor, yesterday on this program we had your former Prime Minister, Fouad Al-Sinora, who told us...
A great man.
Indeed, it was great talking to him. And he said that America's credibility is on the line. America's credibility in the region as a trusted partner is in question. Which of the two candidates do you think is most capable of restoring that trust?
Well, on the short run, I think, and this is surprising to come from me, Harris has a better chance because the legwork has already been done. Blinken and these people have already established some sort of a peace or a roadmap, especially that the Democrats have been talking to the Saudis and to Mohammed bin Salman particularly on account of a peace plan that will encompass the Arab Peace Initiative and the two-state solution. So if I was to bet on the short term, that would be Harris. However, Trump is better on reining in Iran, and which is a very important role to achieving peace.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. Makram Rabah, Assistant Professor in the Department of History at the American University of Beirut. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.